You are listening to the Husband Coach's Corner, the podcast designed to teach husbands how to love their wife each and every day and become better men in the process. I'm your host, Chris Scott, and welcome back to another episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Husband Coach's Corner. Today, I am really excited to be sharing with you something from a lot of questions that I received before about dealing with a wife who is jealous and loving her through it. Now, this can be a little bit of a challenge, and I fully acknowledge that. So if there's something that resonates with you or doesn't resonate with you, feel free to reach out, ask more questions, and I'll do what I can to assist. Now, if you're looking for one-on-one coaching, you already know I offer free consults. All you have to do is go to the description box below and sign up, get on my calendar, and then I'll send you a link to our Google Meet, and that's where we'll meet up. And the last thing that I'll mention, I was asked a lot of questions. Hey, how can I support the show? And the easiest way to do that is you can use the donate feature. If you go to the description box below, it'll take you over to my website where you can donate. And you can also go to marriagedrills.com, look in the upper right hand corner, and you'll see a donate icon there as well. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the content. So first things first, you alone will not be able to remove jealous behavior from your wife. This is something that she's going to have to work through, and depending on who, how, when, what, why the insecurity that triggers the jealousy was caused, it's going to take some effort on her end as well. But what we're going to do today is really unpack the ways that we as husbands can love our wife, even though she has jealous behavior from time to time. And if you are one of those husbands that experiences her jealous behavior on a consistent basis, then hopefully some of the tips and tricks that I have lined up for you will resonate well enough that you can apply and maybe see some improvement in your relationship as well. Now, there are a few ground rules that I have to cover because, we got to give ourselves some parameters to work in. And the first rule is pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. All right. If you know you're the person who caused the insecurity that is triggering the jealous behavior, all right, this is all my guys that are out there on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, double tapping, whatever the thing is, where you are constantly looking at other women and making your wife feel less attractive or whatever the circumstance is, the insecurity that you're building. You got to take ownership of that. All right. You have to know that you're the one that's causing it. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But if you do know that you're the one that's causing the insecurity, take ownership of it. All right. That's the first ground rule. The second ground rule, you have to keep your attitude in check. See, it's easy to fly off at the hinges when you get upset. It takes a real man to take that second and breathe and pause before you respond. It's not easy. I myself get caught up in my emotions from time to time, and I think I shared that many times. The goal is to slow down, embrace whatever the circumstance is, and then respond. All right. So keep your attitude in check, because if your attitude gets out of whack, then you're definitely not going to be loving your wife through this jealous behavior. And trust me, I understand sometimes it is frustrating, but take some time, breathe through it, and after working on it, it'll become a little bit easier each time. All right. I'll be honest. The first time that I had to work through this, I was very upset. And now whenever I get frustrated with anything, because it's not just jealous behavior, right? This technique of keeping her attitude in check, it works for any time that you start to get upset with your wife. So, but now whenever my wife gets me angry, I take some time to breathe through it, and then I respond to her with love most of the time. All right. Just being honest. And then the third ground rule, this is going to take time. Now, I have a whole segment in this episode that talks about being patient, but I want to just give you the expectation up front. This is not an overnight fix. If it were, then everyone would be doing it. This is going to take time. If your wife has jealous behavior, the insecurity that's triggering it, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, that is going to take time for her to get over. Don't worry about it. It's okay that it takes time. What I want you to do in the idea of it taking time is just embrace the fact that you are going through a process of loving your wife. And eventually, the two of you are going to come out on the other side. You have to have that vision of coming out on the other side. And this goes into those SMART goals that I do help you create. But at the same time, if you are constantly fighting against the system, fighting against the process, you're not going to get to that other side. You're just going to find yourself lost in the frustration. So, ground rules: take ownership if you cause the insecurity, keep your attitude in check, and it's going to take time to overcome this. All right. And it's also going to take time for you to change your actions and behavior whenever your wife has jealous behavior. So just keep that in mind. So the first step in loving your wife through a jealous situation is to pray for her. Now, many of you listening, you know that I'm a man of faith, and I pray for my wife every single day. I wake up and it is one of the first things that I do, if not the first thing that I do. Now, when I say pray for your wife, I'm not saying, Lord, I pray that you make her the best woman for me and all those things. No, that is not what I'm praying for. Instead, what I do when I pray for my wife is, one, I'm thanking God that he gave her to me, and it's an honor to be her husband, just as I know she believes it to be an honor to be my wife. So there's a level of humility there. But then I'm praying for the strength for me to deal with her, right? And it's not in a bad sense. Like, I'm not saying, Lord, and this woman, she's giving me a hard time, right? Instead, what I'm saying is, Lord, give me the patience to love her through whatever the circumstances are, whatever the issues are, the challenges are. Now, this is absolutely crucial. It is critical. The reason is, one, my wife is always on my mind, and I'm always looking at ways to develop myself and to manage my actions in the way that I deal with her, right? And I don't mean, when I say deal with her, I'm not saying it like a bad thing, right? But how I interact with her, that all matters. I use a very calm voice when I speak to my wife. That wasn't always the case. That came through prayer and a lot of patience, because it took time to build that. Same thing is going to happen here. So, common theme, right? It's going to take time to build your actions in a way that is going to bring love to your wife, especially when you're loving her through such a challenging situation like jealousy. Jealousy is not one of those easy things that you get over. It does start with prayer. Now, I have a firm belief that marriage, if you don't have a foundation of God in your marriage, then it cannot thrive to the fullest potential that marriage was designed to be, right? So if you are not a believer in Christ, then, please email me. We can talk about that. I have no problem with sharing my faith. And if that's something you have questions about, I will answer that. Now, you're like, you know what, Chris, I'm just not feeling that. I don't want to pray. Then what you can do instead, which I don't believe is the best method, but it is a method that you can do, right? Which I do as well. You can journal about your wife. So that is you taking time in the morning and just saying all the things that you want to affirm about your wife, and then writing down the ways that you are going to do that. This will give you the same idea and concept, albeit not centered around Christ, but it will give you the same end state of thinking about ways that you can engage with your wife in a loving way, even when you have this challenge, right? And when you do write down these affirmations, you have to write down one that talks about her jealousy, when my wife responds in jealousy based off of a situation, I will resolve, or I'll make the determination to respond to her with love and gentleness and patience, right? And kindness. Write that down. Write down what it looks like when you do that. Okay. So praying for your wife, writing down affirmations. And if you are a believer, and you can do the affirmations on top of that, but prayer is just so powerful. That's why I always start off with that one, or wanted to start off with that one. So now we go into a portion where you're going to need a pen and a paper, because you're going to take some time to really reflect on the circumstance that your wife is engaging with, right? And that is, do you know why she's jealous? See, I've already said it. Jealousy is triggered by insecurities, and some of those insecurities could have been caused by you. Some of those insecurities could have been caused by family members or a friend or another person, a coworker. We don't know, right? Or maybe you do. And then there's also insecurities that are caused by our wife that really have nothing to do with us. It's 100% something that she has made up on her own, and it's become an insecurity, which then when she feels like that insecurity is being triggered, she responds with jealousy. And if I haven't said it before, jealousy is usually a symptom of a larger problem, right? So question number one. Now, this is in the category of if you cause the insecurity yourself. If you cause the insecurity, then you absolutely have to own it. Remember, that's ground rule number one. But here's some of the questions that you should be asking. And please feel free to pause if you need to. All right. When does she get jealous? When does your wife get jealous? What does my wife's jealous behavior look like? You want to write down words, actions, body language, or words that she says, actions that she takes, and body language. That's how you want to answer that question. The next question, how long does this behavior last? Is it a passive behavior where it only lasts for a few seconds? Or is this something that has the potential of dragging on? Now, if you believe that your wife has multiple insecurities that trigger jealousy and you just can't pinpoint one, I'm going to ask you to pinpoint just one, because this drill gets a lot more challenging if you're trying to consolidate multiples. All right. So you may have to do this multiple times just to understand. And then how do you respond with love through each of those insecurity moments or those insecurities that your wife has? All right. But try and focus in on just one. What impacts does her behavior have on our marriage? That was the next question. Didn't say that, but the next question, what impacts does her behavior have on our marriage? This is important. Take some time to really write out your response to this one, because the impacts on the marriage, one, this is a marriage podcast, but two, whatever those impacts are, those are going to be critical that you understand how that's working, what's happening in your relationship, and how that hinders or progresses your marriage moving into the future. All right. And then the final question for this segment, what do I think and feel when my wife is behaving in a jealous way? What are my thoughts? What am I feeling? This is a question about you. And the reason why you have to know this, if you are the one who caused this insecurity and your wife responds in this way, this is where you take that ownership, right? And I don't mean this in like a self-loathing type of way or where you have to beat yourself up about it. Instead, you just have to own the responsibility of, okay, I did this and now this is how it makes me feel, right? Because now you can take that information and turn it into an affirmation of how you're going to love your wife. And we'll talk about that in the next segment, but just make sure that you have those answers to that, to those questions. Now, if your wife has insecurities that are caused by someone else that aren't you, It could be a friend, a family member, a relative. I guess a family member and a relative are the same, but you get the point, right? Someone that's not you. Here's the questions that you got to ask. Who caused it and when? Who caused this insecurity in my wife and when did it happen? Is it something from childhood? Is it something from her adult life? Is it something that was caused yesterday, right? These are things, it really does matter to know who caused it and when it happened. All right, so the next question. What is your wife's relationship with that person now? So now that your wife has this insecurity and knowing how long ago this insecurity was caused, what is their relationship like now? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it indifferent? Those are things that you want to mark down on your sheet of paper here. The next question. What is your relationship with that person? So this one is about you and the person who caused insecurity. Now, if this is a person from your wife's distant past that you've never met, then you can just leave that blank or put it doesn't matter, right? Because you don't have a relationship with that person. You can put none. But if this is like an in-law, or maybe it's one of your parents, maybe it's your sister or brother, right? What is your relationship with that person now? Write that down. And then the last question, has there been any improvement over time? And this improvement is really centered around your wife. Has your wife made any improvement on her jealous behavior over time? Or has she been consistently jealous in the capacity that she always has been, and you just haven't seen any improvement? So write down whatever notes you have about that. Now, insecurities caused by others is a really hard area to deal with, mostly because if it's a family member, you have to be tactful in the way that you respond to that individual. Now, if it's a friend, you can just cut ties with a friend and it's not going to hurt anything. But family, I'm a huge advocate for family enrichment and, developing strong ties with family, be it brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, things of that sort, right? If these are people that are causing insecurities in your wife, then you do have to address them, all right? Because as her husband, it is your responsibility, it is our responsibility as husbands to make sure that our wife has a safe space, and that if something is harming her or hindering her in any way, if it is within our grasp to go and address, then we need to go and do that. And sometimes it's not always fun and it's not always beautiful. When you do address these things with your family members or whoever this person is, it builds a level of trust and confidence in you. So when your wife is looking to, if your wife is having a hard time with trusting, then she's going to see that you took care of that for her, and it's going to build that trust. So you have to take care of it. Use tact in the way that you take care of it, because, we don't want to destroy relationships with our family members. But sometimes we just have to go and address these hard situations. And if need be, take a third person with you. So that way you guys can talk about it in a very straightforward and civil way. All right. Now, the last one, or the last category when we talk about knowing what your wife's insecurities are, this last category is a tough one. All right. These are insecurities that your wife has caused for herself. If your wife is causing insecurities for herself, here's a few questions that you can ask. Why does your wife have this insecurity? All right. And if you don't know the answer to this, then you have to go and ask your wife. Now, I do recommend that you jot down some assumptions and then you take those to her and present them in a loving way, in a gentle way, and get them confirmed. All right. I don't recommend showing up blank with these, because if you show up blank, you may not get the response, because as her husband, assuming that you're observing her quite well, you probably have some idea of where the insecurity is coming from. And that leads into the next question. Could you have done something to promote this insecurity. If you've done something that is in promotion of this insecurity, then going back to ground rule number one, which is you got to take responsibility, right? And that's what I'm saying with the first question. You probably have an idea of where these insecurities are coming from. It's not one of those things that you're just like, oh man, I have no idea where this insecurity is coming from, especially if you think you've done something to promote that insecurity. Doesn't mean that you necessarily caused the insecurity, but maybe you put your finger in a wound and turned it a little bit, either directly, indirectly, intentionally, or unintentionally. And then the last question that you can ask, will your wife talk to you about the insecurity? Now, this is a big one, because if your wife doesn't even want to talk to you about the insecurity, it's probably something that is a deep wound. Remember, jealousy is just a symptom that usually is triggered by an insecurity. All right. If your wife is displaying jealous behavior and it's not because of an insecurity you caused or someone else caused, you're probably dealing with something that she made up on her own. And those are really, really hard insecurities to overcome by yourself. You will need a third party. I usually always recommend at this point to go to a therapist, not because I'm not saying like your wife is crazy or anything like that. That's not the thing. All right. Couples therapy is one of the best ways for someone to help you see your entire relationship, right? A licensed therapist who understands psychology and how the thought process works on certain things will be able to assist with walking you guys through some really good techniques of overcoming those insecurities. Now, as a coach, I stand back and I help you see your marriage as a whole and give you different tips and tricks and techniques in order to continue building your marriage. But when you start to get deeper into the psychology piece, that's when you know it's time to go seek a family or a marriage counselor or therapist. In the event that your wife is having some insecurities that she's creating for herself, then you definitely want to go down that route to go see a licensed therapist. So what I want you to notice is none of these questions said anything about, is this a valid jealousy issue or is this a valid issue? All right. In order for us to move on to the next step, we have to give our wife 100% validation that her jealousy is absolutely valid. And I know that sounds counterproductive to what it is that we're trying to do. But again, we're trying to love our wife through jealousy, not remove it. Now, with that being said, when you start to love your wife through jealousy, it does become a moot point, right? Because she will eventually stop being jealous as we continue to love her through it. And we do the next step, which is create a safe space where jealous behavior is not necessary. All right. Create a safe space where jealous behavior isn't necessary. Now, this is not create a safe space where jealous behavior isn't welcome or jealous behavior becomes shamed. That's not what I'm saying here, guys. All right. What I'm saying is we're going to create a space in our relationship where those insecurities are either removed or they're muted or they are dampened. What I'm saying here is that we're going to create a safe space for our wife where those insecurities don't actually trigger jealousy. And this is what I mean by jealousy isn't necessary. All right. How do we do that? Well, the first goal or the first step to this is we have to respond with love every single time. So what you want to do is write down the affirmations about your wife. So when she goes into a jealous behavior fit or whatever, you know exactly how you're going to respond and what it is that you're going to say and how you're going to say it. Now, again, if your wife has multiple areas where she is jealous, you're going to have to write down multiple affirmations, and then you're going to have to write down multiple ways to respond. And hopefully your responses are similar enough that you can use them regardless of the circumstance that you find yourself in with your wife. Now, once you have that, then it just becomes a waiting game of being present and patient for those opportunities to come about. Now, if you know what the insecurity is, all right, because now we have to start addressing the insecurity. When you know what the insecurity is, like you're on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever social media platform, and you're talking to girls and double tapping pictures, right? Saying, oh yeah, look at that. That's awesome. You got to stop, right? If you know that this is leading to jealous behavior for your wife and an insecurity, and quite frankly, it's rude and disrespectful, you got to stop that. All right. Period. There's nothing more to say about that. Now, this is not going to solve the issue overnight, because once you have lost a level of trust in that area, it is hard to rebuild it. You've heard me say this many times, and I just want that to sink in. So if you are doing this, you have to stop, right? Put the shovel down, stop digging the hole that you're in. And the only way that you can start to get out of that hole is by being consistent in loving and affirming your wife against all of the things that you are loving and affirming about everyone else. All right. So instead, take that energy of scrolling and tapping photos on social media of other women, and you should go and tell your wife how beautiful she is. Give her all of that attention. All right. That's going to start to move you in the right direction. Now, obviously, if you find yourself out and you happen to look a certain way and there's a female that walks by and your wife gets jealous, just know, again, if you cause this insecurity, you have to own it and don't get mad, right? That's one of those perfect situations where your affirmation about your wife, meaning my wife is beautiful and I love her more than anyone else, right? That's the affirmation. And then your resolution or your resolve, an example of that would be, in that situation, when my wife gets mad at me in regards to being jealous about me seeing other women or looking at other women, I'm going to turn to her and I'm going to grab her hand and I will apologize for any misunderstanding that she may have gotten from me in that moment. And I'm going to tell her that I love her. And then I'm going to keep my attention focused on her. See, when you change the way you see the problem, instead of being like, yo, chill, stop, that is very different when you turn and you say, okay, yeah, I did that. You know what? I'm sorry, honey. Did not mean to offend you or do anything that is not loving towards you, right? Whatever. You have to make it make sense for your marriage, but somewhere along those lines. And that's where you're starting to create that space where jealousy isn't necessary. Okay? And be genuine about it. I'm not teaching you like Jedi mind tricks so you can like get out of getting in trouble, right? Again, you got to own this. That's all I got on that one. Now, when it comes to creating a safe space when you have family, friends, or coworkers that cause the insecurity, you got to address those insecurities, again, tactfully with the family, cutting out friends, especially if these are toxic friends that are not beneficial to your marriage in any way, shape, or form. These are usually easy people to identify. I think everyone can identify them in their marriage, right? Those are the people that you have to say, all right, you know what? I'm cutting ties, because your wife means way more to you than that friendship will ever mean. All right. We have to cut ties with our friends that are causing issues in our relationship. There's no way of getting around that, because you could try to address it. Sure. You can be like, hey, you need to cut that off. And if you have a good friend then they'll respect that and you won't have any more issues. But if you don't have such a good friend, or your wife doesn't have such a good friend, they won't respect that. And they'll tell you to go pound sand. And now you're at this battle for who's going to win the war on this, right? Just cut ties. It's a lot easier when it's friends and coworkers, same concept. Cut ties. It's a lot easier. All right. Now, creating a safe space for your wife, if she is the one creating the insecurity in her mind, that is something that's going to be challenging. I'm not going to lie to you, because she is the person that is holding herself in this prison, so to speak, of whatever this insecure thing is. It could be her self-image that maybe no one ever told her anything, but because she reads magazines or her favorite celebrity looks a certain way and she has always wanted to look that way, but has never been able to achieve it. So now she has self-image issues because she couldn't attain something that no one ever forced her to go get or, has commented on or whatever. But in her mind, she's made this insecurity. So every time she sees a person who is the ideal figure that she would like to be, and this can go beyond just the physical appearance of a woman, right? This could also be personality. This could be relationship status. This could be all kinds of stuff, right? As soon as that insecurity is triggered, then she will lash out in jealous behavior. And there's not anything that you caused for this, right? This is a very unique situation, but I have coached many husbands who have experienced this. It's a very hard thing to create a safe space for something that you have no real connection to, right? So what do you do in these situations? Because doing nothing isn't an option, or at least it isn't to me. The first thing is see if your wife is willing to talk to you about it. Spend time just talking to her and not devalidating, if that's even a word, not devalidating or saying, hey, you don't have to feel that way, right? Because as soon as you say that, you might as well just be handing her a brick to build up another wall of defense and security around her insecurity. All right, let that mental picture sink in. Instead, what you want to do is say, okay, I could see how that is an issue, and then leave it at that. Let her speak her mind about whatever that insecurity is. And then you can ask her questions about it and say, well, have you ever considered this? And see where she goes from there. Whatever you do, I have to highly recommend you do not try to tell her she cannot do something or don't feel a certain way, because this is an insecurity that she is battling, right? Instead, what you have to do is help her see that she doesn't have to go through it alone. So that's where you create that safe space, right? And once she realizes that she has a true partner in you, over time, that insecurity will become less of a trigger for her jealous behavior on certain things. Now, when you know what this insecurity is, which is why you have to know what your wife is being insecure about, when you know what it is, you can then take that information and say, okay, my wife is insecure about relationships. How can I make a safe space in our relationship around our relationship? And that sounds like, some sort of inception or mind mesh thing. But essentially what you're saying is, if my wife is triggered by other people's relationship goals on Facebook and, she's seeing that they're doing all these things, how is it that I can start to do things that resonate in our relationship that gets her mind away from what other people are doing in their relationship and focused back on our relationship? So that way she can see that we're doing stuff that is amazing and awesome. It may not be what her friend Becky or Sally is doing and posting, but she'll have her own content to kind of post. And then it becomes a more interesting relationship between the two of you. And she's no longer interested in what other people are doing in their relationship, right? Now, obviously, do that if it makes sense for your relationship and your marriage. But the goal is, how do you redirect your wife to focusing on your relationship and not others, if that is one of the insecurities that she has? Know that that's a very specific thing, but hopefully that made sense and it resonates with someone. Now, after you have prayed for your wife, written down your affirmation, written down your answer or your canned response when your wife goes into a jealous situation, you know what her insecurities are that triggers her jealousy, and you've created this safe space around the jealous behavior or the insecurity, so to speak, so that way the jealous behavior never has to happen. Then it goes into that last step that I told you about, and that is being patient. You have to be patient. Now, this should be really a sense of comfort for everyone. Being patient in loving your wife means that you are embracing her wherever she is in the circumstance that she needs you there for. All right. You do not want to wake up one day and have all of this jealous behavior gone. That sounds like an amazing thing in theory. But if that were to happen, then you would not have grown through something with your wife. That means you have to go find another thing to grow through. These jealous behaviors are not a bad thing as long as it's not impacting your marriage in a negative way, which again goes back to those questions, right? Well, let me rephrase. As long as it's not impacting your marriage in a severely negative way. If it's causing some stress on the marriage, those are opportunities for you to grow through whatever that issue is. All right. That's just the way it is. In order for us to grow, we have to put a little bit of stress on whatever the thing is. And in this case, it's your marriage. Now, I'm talking about a healthy amount of stress. All right. If this is leading into physical altercations, things getting destroyed, and there's a level of abuse involved with the jealous fit, then that's a whole other thing. And you can still love your wife through this. Again, creating that safe space wherever that insecurity is. But you got to be patient, right? You got to stay consistent with those resolves that you've made of, okay, when my wife hits this jealous fit, this is how I'm going to respond to her. And the way that you can stay consistent in being patient is remembering those affirmations that whatever you wrote, you say that to yourself before you respond, right? This is how you remain patient. This is how you keep your attitude in check. And this is how you respond to your wife in a loving way that hopefully resonates with her and keeps her coming back to you, and you're starting to build that trust and confidence. All right. And when you show up consistently in this regard, you start to notice the change. And when you start to notice the change, you start to see the growth in your relationship, in your actions in response to her, and in her actions in response back to you. So it's very important that you be patient and you just allow the process to take its time in order to build your relationship. There is no way that I can tell you how long it's going to take for your wife to overcome her insecurities, right? Because again, this is not on you. You can help your wife overcome these insecurities, but what you're going to do is show her love through her jealous responses or the symptom of her insecurity. You're going to show her love in those areas. And then some point, your wife will overcome those insecurities, or at least they'll be less of a burden on the relationship as a whole. So hopefully this episode resonated with someone out there. If it did, leave me a review on Apple iTunes, or you can send me a comment about the show. Look in the description box below, and there's a link where you can send a comment about the show. So I'm going to leave it there, but I do want you to know this was not an exhaustive way of dealing with jealous behavior or any form of behavior. This is just a way that you could start to deal with that. If, again, you want to support this show and donate, check the description box below. Until next time, I want you guys to find a way to love your wife every day. Peace.